Hey, everybody, it's Mark Pattison back again with another episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. And before I get into this week's rockstar guest, I want to draw attention to my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com. And we've got over 240 different inspirational podcasts that you can go check out. I would love a ratings and review through Apple if you do that to help elevate the show. Popularity in the world of Apple. That's number one. Number two is I continue to raise money for Higher Ground. It's all about recreational therapy to help people like my daughter who has epilepsy overcome their adversity and find their way. And then finally, I have the film that the NFL did on my amazing journey up Mount Everest that can be found there as well. And by the way, I've also started a YouTube channel. You can go to the icon on that website. And if you'd please just subscribe to that, because we're trying to get over 1,000 subscribers so we can start funneling money to Higher Ground to, once again, help everybody. And most all those videos are all from my climbs around the world and some other inspirational notes here and there. So on that note, let's get into today's amazing guest. She is the one, the only Lauryn Williams. How are you doing, Lauryn?
I am having a wonderful day, Mark. I am so excited to be on the show. It's been a long time coming for us, but I'm excited to talk to your audience.
Yeah, I mean, look, well, let's just set this up. And you're a remarkable athlete, and you're like me in many ways in terms of you did something with passion. You're just an amazing four-time Olympian in two different sports. I want to get into that because we're knee deep into the Olympics right now. You're both a summer and a winter Olympian, which is incredible. I feel like I haven't done anything. Like I got to get my butt in gear to go accomplish a few things out there. And you did it, and you're very talented. And now you've transitioned, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you've transitioned now into the real world. And for a lot of people who, for you, probably my sense is for people like you and I, growing up and running and being athletic and having that success go all the way to the top. And then you're in a desk job, you're in front of your computer, you're doing all those things, how you adjust to that. So first of all, let's start back on the beginning, like where all this came from in terms of your track career. I think it did start with a track, not the bobsled. We'll get into that in a few minutes, but where did this whole passion come in terms of you wanting to get out there and run as fast as you can and winning all these different races?
Yeah, so my mom will tell the story that I got home faster than the family German Shepherd one day, and that is where my track and field career began. My dad, on the other hand, has a different story. It is that I was racing the FloJo hologram at the Carnegie Science Center, and I beat the hologram. So I was the only person to beat it that day, the youngest person to beat it that day. And he was like, oh, wow, my daughter must really have some talent. And so that's kind of where the story begins. But ultimately, I had a passion and a love for being competitive, for being outside, for being around rambunctious little, tomboy, as they call us, girls that like sports. Yeah. And it led to the opportunity for me to get a free education. So I always knew the importance of education. My parents were very, very serious about making sure that my grades were good and that I stayed on top of that aspect of things. And when I realized that I had to find a way to pay for college because it wasn't free, like, the other part of my education was, I was like, wow, well, what am I going to do to be able to, to kind of cover that? And the idea of athletic scholarships came about, and I realized like, oh, someone would actually pay for me to go to school if I keep running around this circle. That's already like a fun thing to do. Excellent. Sign me up. And so I got to go to the University of Miami on a track scholarship. And little did I know that 3 years later, I would be, as a junior in college, the second fastest person in the world, the NCAA champion, and looking toward my first Olympic Games. It wasn't a goal or an aspiration of mine. It was more so something that kind of came about because I was just working my butt off to kind of repay my coach for the opportunity to get the free education, because I knew how important that was, or, how expensive it was really. And I wanted to make sure that I honored her by working as hard as I could.
That's incredible. And I have played down in Miami. I played in the Orange Bowl. We used to practice when we were preparing to play in the Orange Bowl at the University of Miami. So I've been there, and season year round, just fantastic weather, especially for a sprinter. I went to the University of Washington, more of a cold, more damp climate, I can only imagine. But off you went. 2004, you were able to go to Athens. And I want to go around the world a little bit, because you're able to do these different things, right? And so now you go to the University of Miami. It's an amazing career. And through this, as you said, you're getting not only this free education, but you're also getting to travel the world because you joined Team USA. You're one of the fastest women in the world. What was Athens like?
It was amazing. For my career to start in the birthplace of the Olympic Games, I think was an extra special moment for me. To know that there was so much history behind everything that goes into my opportunity to be able to compete, and to be there in Athens, Greece for the first time was really cool. But I was also kind of like a deer in headlights, in the sense that, like I said, I was a junior in college. Earlier that year, I had just been, hanging out with friends, trying to run as fast as I could, win the NCAA title. And now here I am representing Team USA. So I felt a little bit of the pressure related to that, but also it was kind of like, well, why not? I'm here. Why not try my hardest? Why not see what happens? And I think that actually alleviated some of the pressure, is not having to actually do it for a living at that moment.
Yeah. So now we're talking about 2004 and the 100 meters. Now, once again, 4 years later in Beijing, where the Olympics are right now for the Olympics, for the Winter Games, back you go. And what was that like being in China? I've been to China a couple of times.
Yeah, that was rough. It was really tough because there wasn't a lot of infrastructure put in place related to making sure that the athletes had what they needed from being able to navigate the overall games experience. There were not a lot of translators. There weren't, easy ways to get around. And so you felt kind of isolated. The facilities were A++. Some of the best facilities I have ever seen, and same reports I'm getting from Beijing now as it pertains to the Winter Olympics that are being taken care of there. But it wasn't the most fun games from a standpoint of being able to, be in that country, kind of get immersed in that culture and really feel like you became a part of it. It was more like a get the job done and keep it moving sort of games. And, from an overall feeling standpoint, I felt a lot more pressure in China because I was the silver medalist from 2004 and the gold medalist had since retired. So it was like, all eyes on me, you better show up. And also you're being paid to do this thing. So you better show people the value of what you're being compensated.
Well, 4 years later, now you go to London, right? And who doesn't like London? And you end up winning the gold. So that must have been a magical experience for you, being in Britain, enjoying all that. And really, my God, what's it like to stand on the podium, not just for the silver, but now you're on the gold. You're the best person in the world.
Yeah, so London was really cool. It's a great experience. It was a great experience. Like I said, infrastructurally, it was in a wonderful situation. But the thing that was most cool about London was the idea that 2004 and 2008, we did not win the relay. Actually, we didn't finish the relay. So we didn't have the opportunity to go for gold. And easily, we should have been a gold medal team and probably even a world record team in both of those opportunities. So to get to 2012 and to win a gold medal, break the world record in the 4x1 relay was kind of like that sweet redemption. So London was a really good games.
That's great. And then we'll talk about the 214 here in a minute, but I want to go back on, again, 2004, 2008, 2012. And with all these things, and I've done this, I just recently completed my 7 summits around the world. And so it took me 9 years to do just that. And playing in the NFL and major college, that was another 10 years. So I've had these different periods of commitment, and the net is it takes a tremendous amount of dedication and commitment. And what was the one thing, what was the why, what was the purpose that really kept you in the game to get out there and run your tail off and be committed to getting up and doing all those morning workouts and those afternoon things you did in your diet? And, you have to be such a disciplined, focused athlete to make sure that you can compete at the highest level for that period of time.
Yeah, I would say it was the pursuit of possibility. To wake up every day and not really know what's possible is one of the coolest things in the world. And to really embrace the idea instead of being afraid of I don't know what's coming around the corner, to look at all the opportunity that's in front of me and how can I go out there and reach my full potential. So I think the thing that kind of kept me going was the idea of where's that next level that I can go to? How can I continue to tap into becoming the best me that I can be? And what is actually possible? That drove me to keep working harder.
That's really interesting. I had a different view on these different things I've done, which is whatever I'm doing is not good enough. And I'm not sure the mentality of that. So there was always more, there was always more, there was always more, because I don't want to leave anything at the table. And that's the thing that has helped drive me and fuel me in all these different things, these athletic things I've done, over my lifetime. So it's just a different way to look at it. There's no right or wrong, but it's just at the end of the day, it's the motivation that gets you out of bed and keeps you pushing down the track. I want to ask you about, and again, before we get into 214, I want to ask you about the pressure. You've mentioned that word a couple different times, and you're seeing this stuff that Simone Biles went through, the skier, MacLeod right now is dealing with, and just all this pressure, the expectations of winning the gold. What happens if you don't? I mean, back in the day, we weren't talking about this stuff, right? It was just get out there and get it done. And now it's coming full circle, and it's being put out there. And some of these athletes are backing off and saying, I can't perform and all this stuff. I mean, what's your position on that? And also, like, how did you feel? You mentioned this a couple of times in terms of the word pressure. How did you deal with that back in the day?
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely something that we're talking about a lot more, and we did not talk about previously. And I think it was one of those things where it was just kind of, the attitude and the culture around sport has been shut up and perform. We've heard that in so many different variations over the course of years. You never felt like you had a voice to be able to say anything other than something that was related to sports. You didn't have a voice to talk about your struggles, especially if you were an elite athlete. And I definitely felt that pressure as well, to kind of get in front of the camera, say something nice, say something pleasant. Wasn't my day today, but all the other competitors did their best, or, what was politically correct, as opposed to like, wearing your heart on your sleeve and saying I'm going through a really rough time right now, just broke up with my significant other, or whatever the case may be that may be going on. So I think it's really important that this narrative is now changing to, hey, who is this person beyond the athlete, the world-class athlete that we see, and how can we allow them to share themselves, good, bad, and the ugly of it all. I'm on board with there being more open sharing, especially in light of social media and the way that media is, covering things so much differently than when we were competing. These athletes have a spotlight on them all the time. And I think that it's important that they, like you said, if we're going to have to be in the spotlight, that they be able to share what is not just positive, but also the real parts of that is everyone's life.
Yeah, it's not the same, but it's almost like the concussion that I dealt with back in the day. Never, ever did anybody, any one of my teammates ever, or the people that we're playing against, ever go out of a game because of a concussion. You just didn't go out, right? So you got your bell rung, but it's the same type of thing where, it's one of those things you never talked about and just kind of happened, and people are still dealing with the pressure. People are still getting concussions. And now, all these years later, now we're dealing with the reality of there are concussions and people are getting brain damage, and in the mental health side of it, of many of these different athletes feeling the pressure. So it's really interesting, there's different parallels. So I'm trying to understand this. So, 2004 silver, 2008 Beijing, 2012 you get a gold. You're this world-class athlete. And now all of a sudden, something that you've never done, you went to the University of Miami, you're now living in Texas and Dallas, and you're not a snow girl. I live in Sun Valley, Idaho, so I'm looking at snow out my window right now. And you go to Sochi on the other side of the world, and I've been very close to Sochi, one of the mountains I climbed in the Caucasus Mountains, and you sign up for the bobsled. I mean, how does this even come into your orbit?
Yeah, so bobsled is everyone's second sport. The way it comes into anyone's orbit is by some sort, form, or fashion, word of mouth, or some kind of interesting story, because it's, like I said, everyone's second sport. So for me, I had read an article about another young lady who was a track and field athlete having tried it. There was some media coverage around it, and I was like, wonder how she found that. How do you even get into bobsled? I don't know anything about bobsled other than the movie Cool Runnings, which I think is probably most people's frame of reference. And so she and I bumped into one another, actually headed to another race. We were going to Rome, and I just asked her about it. Like, how was your experience? What was it like? How did you even find bobsled? And she's like, you totally should give it a try, Lauren. And I was at the end of my track and field career. I knew that, I was not not going to continue on for the following season. So I was like, why not? I showed up a month later at the USA Championships for bobsled, and that was pretty much going to be my last opportunity to try. There had been some previous trials, but I made it just in the nick of time. I got third place, and kind of the rest was history. The next 6 months were a really, really steep learning curve, but it was also the most fun 6 months of my life to date.
But how do you do that? I mean, let's just, I really want to pinpoint this. So you show up these championships or whatever, you take third, but like, how do you even know how to jump in the back of a bobsled? I mean, I don't, I'm trying to understand how this works.
You literally, like, there's something in you, I think, as a competitor, as an elite athlete, that just like you figure it out. Like, that's the one thing, you know, like what separates somebody who likes to work out from a world-class athlete is like your ability to figure things out. Oh. And so I was terrified. I had no idea what I was doing. Like, literally, I got one try the day before. Someone showed me the sled and they said, you run behind it, you take X number of steps and you jump in. And I was like, okay, I'm running on ice. There's the equivalent of like needles underneath these shoes. I have someone else's shoes on because I don't have ice spikes at this time. Yeah. They're flipping and flopping all over the place. And I run as fast as I can and I jump in and I'm like, whoa, I did it. Like, so some of it is just like, you know, like I said, they say opportunity knocks, like you kind of open the door, but it's like really saying like, I'm not going to be afraid of this thing. What do I have to lose? Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, there's two parts of it. So the one is what you just explained of, you know, pushing it 10 steps or whatever and jumping in. And the second part is going down. So you've got a driver, I think, that's in front and now you jump behind and now you're going down this track at 100 miles per hour. I mean, was that terrifying for you since you'd never done that in a very unfamiliar territory for you?
Oh, it was god awful. It was absolutely terrible. It's kind of like being kicked off a cliff in a washing machine. That's what your first bobsled experience will be like. You're not wearing a seatbelt. Someone else is driving. You don't see anything. So, you know, it's not like a car where you're a passenger and you're looking out the window and knowing what the driver's doing. You jump in this sled and you put your head down. So you hear all this noise around you. It's completely noisy. You have no idea where you are. And like you said, you're going somewhere between 70 and 90 miles an hour. It's just unbelievable. It's like, why would anyone do this? Like, I'm signing up to get in a car accident, be ejected from a vehicle that I'm not driving, and I'm never going to know when it's coming. I took a 4-hour nap the first time I came down the bobsled track because it was so exhilarating, so exhausting. But as time goes on, like I said, clearly I got back in a few more times. The more you learn, the more relaxed you become and the better you become at bobsledding.
Okay, I asked you about Athens in 2004. We talked about Beijing in 2008. You won the gold in 2012 in London. Sochi, what was that like?
Sochi was a pretty cool experience. Like I said, bobsled in and of itself was the best 6 months of my life. And so to get to Sochi, you know, it was abnormally warm for a Winter Olympics. So that kind of threw things for a loop. But, you know, as a summer athlete, I wasn't mad about the fact that it was warm. And just to be able to work together as a team. So we took 3 sleds, Team USA did, and we didn't know until maybe 10 days before who was going to compete with whom. So the 3 drivers knew they have a team, and then which of the 3 brakemen were going to be chosen to ride with. I would say that was probably the hardest thing that we had to kind of navigate in Sochi. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't so much looking at the city or, you know, the experience, but we were really, really keyed into what we need to do to be able to earn our spot in either USA 1, 2, or 3. And it ended up, I was pretty much a shoe-in, so I thought, for USA 2. But I got the surprise information, you know, on the day that they announced that I was going to ride USA 1. And so it was a really cool experience to say, hey, I did put in the work, and they think enough of me to help, to allow me to help our best driver go for gold.
And you did win gold.
We won silver by silver. 1 by 0.1 of a very close margin.
But still, okay. I mean, you won gold already, but you know, silver. I mean, my God, like of all the teams, how many teams that were out there of all the nations around the world, and you got a silver for something you only did 6 months ago. I mean, it's insane. It's insane that you did something you didn't even know anything about. You didn't even know what a bobsled is. Now you jump in this thing and you're wearing the right stuff. You're partner with the right person. And even though you were just a fraction of a second, you know, off of winning the gold, you were right there. I mean, I can't imagine, like, almost dumb luck that, hey, you fell into this, you went after something, you achieved it, and you got to be once again back on the podium.
Yeah, I have had a pretty awesome life. No complaints here. And never could have mapped this story out on my own. And I think that's one of the coolest things is like you never know where life is going to take you. But kind of to go with the cliche, when opportunity knocks, like I'm like running through the door, like, okay, let's try this new thing. It sounds awesome. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, but if you don't try, you don't know what you can achieve.
It's such a great way to look at it. And that's one of the things I try to encourage a lot of people. It's just like stepping into the fear and going after things that you don't know. And because, the prize can be so grand, on the other side. I know that in 2009, obviously you were starting to think more forward about your career. You went and got your MBA, but where I'm going with this is about kind of, I use this as a generic term, but life after football, right? Because you hear about that so often. And for you, you've been this world-class athlete. You've had these amazing experiences between college, between all these track meets, between the Olympics, between training, switching over into the bobsled, going summer, winter. It's amazing. What was that like for you in terms of when you finally decided to put your cleats down, so to speak, and now, okay, I've got to move on to my next career. And as you know, the one of the things that I found that was really difficult for me is, you don't get that same exhilaration. For me, I was wide receiver, and I ended up being on the right side of the ball several times when there was the last second of the game we won. And the crowd goes crazy, and there's hundreds of thousands of people. And the same thing for you, right? And so dealing with that, I know adulation is in there, but it's you're not getting. You have a win in business. And it's just not the same, like winning the gold. You don't have all these people, you don't have television. It's just you win something and you move on to the next thing. And what was that like for you in terms of that transition?
Yeah, it was really, really tough. And I think this is, as we talked about mental health and the narratives of things that are not talked about, is the support that exists for athletes to transition from sport to life after sport is not up to par as of yet. There's a lot of people that are doing various things, but I don't think we have it like kind of fully nailed down. And so I was no different in the sense that I really struggled with the transition. You wake up one day and all of a sudden no one is cheering for you. It's not your full-time job to work out. So you need to figure out what it looks like to be healthy and, to do exercise for health, not just for to earn a living. But then there's also like, who am I beyond this thing that everybody has told me I am for the last, 10 years, 20 years, depending on how long you were able to compete. And so I didn't know who I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. I ended up finding financial planning simply kind of to fill a gap. So I had two financial advisors that I didn't feel like did a really good job for me during the course of my career as a professional athlete. And I asked a lot of my friends like kind of what they were doing with their money. And I was just trying to get a really good understanding for how does all this work? And it just kind of led me down the road of realizing that there was a gap in the industry. Young professionals don't have a place to go to organize their finances, to get a budget, to become financially more literate above and beyond. So much of the financial industry is investment focused, and investments is definitely an important part of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. Paying down student loan debt is something we're dealing with now. People have credit card debt and medical debt and things like that. What about paying for your kids' education or saving up for that? Everybody's trying to be a first-time home buyer in their 20s and 30s. There's so many different pieces of your financial puzzle that like no one teaches you how to navigate. And I just felt that on and on and on during my career. And I kind of fell into what was going to be the next thing for me, but it still wasn't easy. I was very nervous. I was older than everybody else, my peers in the industry. So, they came out of college and got an internship somewhere. And, by that time, probably been working 7 or 8 years in the industry. Here I am, almost 30 years old, or actually I was 30 years old and just starting. So I'm kind of entry level. And then I also came from great earnings as a track and field athlete to entry level earnings as a financial planner. There's all these different things that are telling you like your worth and your value, and you're trying to navigate your identity. And it's just kind of a cluster of like not fun stuff to kind of have to deal with and no emotional support to really help you.
Our stories are so similar. It's incredible. I mean, even though you went off and did track and field and were involved in the Winter Olympics, and I stopped playing basically at 30. Everything you just said, I went through. I went from the top to the bottom in terms of being financially set. I had no skills, more or less. Had to go do something, right? I had to go figure it out, right? And I'm in a good place today, but boy, those couple of years were really tough in terms of trying to get over that bridge and trying to figure it out and what was on the other side. I knew I could do something great, and it was really just trying to figure out how I was going to channel that energy from point A to point B to make that happen. And obviously you've done that. So what does your life look like today?
So today I am the owner of a financial planning company called Worth Winning, where I help young professionals organize their finances. I have been running this business. Actually, it'll be 6 years in April. So
Congrats.
yeah, I made it over the 5-year hump, which is a pretty big deal. They say most
Yeah.
businesses don't make it. That's kind of like a second milestone, if you will.
Mhm.
I now have one full-time and one part-time employee. So I feel like, yeah, I'm really adulting. Someone else is depending on me to be able to feed themselves. And it's been really rewarding to be able to help young professionals organize their finances. Like I said, there's so many things that we don't know, so many gaps in the industry as it pertains to what is necessary. And so I've found work that is fulfilling, that, offers me, I would say, okay compensation. I definitely feel like, back in the world of sports, I'm still taking a kind of a step down, and I'm trying to figure out like how to make a business that's profitable, but also impactful. And I now have a better appreciation for what it means to be a consumer and to be a business owner. And so I think one of the things that I focus on quite a bit now is making sure that people understand the value of what they're getting for various services, and the value being provided, because you charge a price as a financial planner.
Mhm.
And people are like, but what about this? And then they don't think about the fact that you have an employee, 2 employees that also have to be taken care of, like the cost that is related. They're thinking about what happens in the moment. I had someone recently, they said, we finished 15 minutes early. Are you going to refund me the rest of the time? And so, as a consumer, sometimes we think of things as like, oh, I'm getting this per minute or this per second, or, this for this. To really, I've changed my mindset a lot to be thinking about value, as opposed to be thinking about like the dollars and cents related to something that I'm getting value from. So it's been a really cool journey, and, to be knee deep in financial stuff all the time. And like I said, talking about worth and value and cost and pricing and, saving, all these different numerical things has been just really, really rewarding, but also very interesting.
Yeah. Before we went live here, you were talking about 12-hour days, and you're kind of sighing like, oh man, I'm in this chair all this time. It's not like back in the day, and I'll do my thing. And that's just a lot of times the reality of the business of trying to get up and off the ground. I've got this saying, work, life, play. And, at the end of the day, that's really equates to balance. And I think one of the things that we all need, and again, I said this, I think some of my best ideas come when I'm out in the mountains, when I'm outside, when I'm out walking. I've been grinding away all day at the computer. I'm just like, ugh. And the last thing I want to do is go do that. But the best thing that I can do is go do that. Right. Because that can really fuel new creativity, and hopefully that you've either are learning or getting there, or you're already there in terms of that work, that life, that balance, that play, that you have in your life as you go forward.
Yes, I am. I'm working on the work, life, play.
Yeah.
I definitely don't have that balance as of yet. And I know how important it is. I think I'm actually at the period of like having the epiphany of, like you said, you go through this entrepreneurial grind, and then you're not, just head down at the computer all the time. But that's not ultimately the goal. The goal was to grind, to be able to, like you said, live and to play.
Yeah.
And so now I'm starting to prioritize like letting my foot off the gas so that I can live and play, because it's just completely unhealthy. And I started getting some signs of like, hey, you're getting pretty unhealthy. I gained some weight. I wasn't feeling well. There's a kind of like a series of like, you can't sit in front of this computer all day and just grind it out. You need to go live and play. Don't keep putting that off. One, because you want to do those things, but 2, they're very important for your overall health. It's a good, well-rounded lifestyle.
Well, you're also trying to, I think, as you trickle it down, you're part of that value is you're also trying to tell these people that you're mentoring about work-life play. And if you're not following that example, then, it's just so anyways, that's all part of grinding and building a business. And we've all been there. I have been there. I've been out unbalanced. You're constantly trying to seek balance, but then you're unbalanced. And that's happening all the time. And that's just all part of life. But that's also about trying to revisit your goals and where you're at and all those different things. Where can people find you at?
You can find me at Worth Winning on Instagram, at Worth_winning on Twitter, and worth-winning.com if you're looking on the internet. I am pretty easy. My name is Lauryn Williams. I spell it with a Y, so Lauryn. You can also find Lauryn Williams, the person, all over everything too. So Lauryn C. Williams on Instagram, Lauryn C. Williams on Twitter, Lauryn-Williams.com.
Man, you're all over the place. So certainly you're worth winning. And I really, really appreciate you bringing your energy, your enthusiasm, and just, the gold, the silver, and all the other things that you brought to this podcast today. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you coming on.
Mark, thanks so much for having me on the show. This has been a blast.
All right. There she is, the one, the only Lauryn Williams. Thank you.